Monday, so you know what it is, what it do, what it is. I am the Grizz, and welcome back to Yesterday Today. But before we get into it, lads and ladettes, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button, and make sure you hit that red subscribe button, and make sure you turn on all notifications so you know when your boy is posted. So we're going to get right into the fact that we got a chance to hear a little bit more about Final Fantasy VII Integrate and just a tidbit about what's going on with Part 2. And then, of course, we also heard about some of this Epic versus Apple court stuff going on, and it's just absolutely crazy and really interesting to see where this is going. This and more right now. Alright, so we got a final trailer for Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, which is a long title for some reason, on Friday. And, well, it still looks pretty good. Free upgrade to the PS5, but then you can also get the Yuffie expansion if you buy it. If you don't buy it, just the PS5 version. You know, that kind of deal, that whole situation. But we also got a chance, and first of all, the game looks phenomenal. More bosses, and it's I can't wait to go back and finish this game, and I definitely will be finishing it on the PS5, because why not, right? Haptic feedback, DualSense controller, all of that great stuff, right? But then we got a chance to hear from the director about Part 2, right? So Tatsuya Nomura, he basically said this: in the sequel, the cloud is running in the wilderness. I think I can enjoy it with a different atmosphere from the previous work. Development is proceeding smoothly. Announced information about the sequel. The sequel is a story that starts immediately after this Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. So whenever you finish the Yuffie expansion, this is exactly where it picks off from. So I'm not at liberty to really just be discussing stuff. I'm only at liberty to discuss what I have played in the remake. I'm not one of those hardcore Final Fantasy fans. I will definitely say that. Never said it. Shout out to my Final Fantasy VII fans who played the game back in the day. Shout out to my boy Josh, who when I used to go to his house, he used to really just be into it. Like 3, 4 discs. I didn't have the patience then. I surely don't have the patience now. That's why I'm glad this remake is broken up into parts. And I remember when people gave the Square so much crap for delaying it, and this game has been absolutely beautiful. And then they were like, oh, where's Part 2? Well, the following year, we are getting Integrate, and that includes the Yuffie expansion. They're at work. Be patient, fans. I know a lot of game franchises got a lot of toxic fan bases, but don't let this get the best of you. This game is fire. Play Final Fantasy VII again on your PS5 if you are lucky enough to have one, and go ahead and get that Yuffie expansion just to quench that appetite until maybe next year when Part 2 comes out. Who knows? So there's a story developing around Epic versus Apple right now. They got a lot of stuff going on in court. They even got Microsoft involved, and well, you know, Apple might actually be in their favor. I don't know all the legal stuff, but this has been going on for months, right? But here's something interesting. Something got out over on Reset Era where Epic decided to just contact all of the consoles, but you know, they decided to contact all of the consoles, but they specifically contacted PlayStation and offered them a large sum of money for 4 to 6 titles. They offered them $200 million. So here you go, over on Reset Era, Rygor, who's the member, and it says individual tactics, Sony one-player titles, they offer extended at $200 million for 4 to 6 titles. And they're awaiting feedback. And then on the Microsoft side, they're opening conversations. Internal feedback from Microsoft, their PC Game Pass leader, is against what we are doing. They are effectively bidding against us for content. Phil is meeting with Gabe Newell, of course, Phil Spencer and Gabe Newell of Valve occasionally. And then Nintendo IP is not started, is a moonshot unto itself. Corporate history says this is a non-starter. Like I'm just be honest. Y'all tried with Nintendo, and that's cool. I respect that, because you might as well try it, right? That's just what business is. But from the fan side who loves Nintendo and all companies, of course, really, and you know, I'm a fan of Nintendo, but it's, you know, I knew Nintendo wouldn't be with that because they hold their IPs very dear. Very dear. I'm talking about, like, it's funny to a casual fan be like, why I can't play Mario on PlayStation? And then to just really try to explain it, be like, it's only on Nintendo. Why? You know what I'm saying? I've actually had these conversations. They hold their IPs dear, and this is still relatively new on the Sony side when they're putting stuff on Valve's platform, Steam, and it's on the internet. You know what I'm saying? It's on PC officially. But Xbox, they got Game Pass. Why would they want to do that? And they're meeting with Steam, and they just figured they can expand it. But I don't see any L's that they can take if they put it on Epic's Game Store. I really don't see it. But Nintendo, well, they're not really taking any L's here, because given the fact that, well, they've sold over 80 million Nintendo Switches, and they're projected to sell over 20 million over the next fiscal year. Why do they need anybody else? They figure they were doing our own thing. Literally doing their own thing. They're dropping random stuff. They gave us this jump rope game during the pandemic, and now they also gave us a game where it's basically Dreams, but Nintendo style, and you're just creating. It's just really, really awesome. And I just love what Nintendo does. They walk to the beat of their own drum, but it's really interesting to see what Epic is doing, and they're trying to swap everything up. But remember, they're actually operating at a loss, the Epic Game Store, and they won't be profiting for another few years. So I'm really, really interested in seeing where this is going. They started conversations with Microsoft, and they're waiting to hear stuff with PlayStation. So let's see where that goes. I'm really, really interested. Just let me know what you think in the comments below, though. So I know what you're thinking to yourself. Is he about to talk about Metroid Prime Trilogy again? Well, the picture on the screen dictates that answer is yes, because, well, we got a chance to hear something about Metroid Prime over the weekend, but it just wasn't what I was hoping, or many other fans who was hoping. Like, I gotta be honest with y'all, right? I've always been a fan or appreciator of Metroid, and I've always played it back in the day. Never finished one, right? I know I say that a lot, but it's just whatever, right? I like Metroidvania games. I do. But Metroid, I haven't gotten around to it. But I definitely played Prime. I own Prime 1 and 2, as I always say every time I talk about it. But we haven't gotten about Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch. Why is that? Well, a former developer that worked for Retro Studios actually had something to say. His name is Michael Weekon, and he used to work for Retro Studios, and here's what he was on Facebook, and this is what he had to say. The biggest issue is that Retro Studios no longer has functional editor tools to work with the Prime code base, so everything has to be brute force hard coded, meaning they gotta kind of just really go in there and cram stuff together, and they just gotta really, you know what? I don't know code. I'm just gonna go ahead. I don't know code, but it just sounds like it's a little bit more complex. But then he goes on to continue to say, rebuilding the hundreds of interaction sets in Metroid Prime 3 alone, not to mention retuning the gameplay to take in the slower engagement pacing of conventional controls, would probably take a year with a 4 to 5 person team full time by itself. He then continued to say, I am pretty skeptical it will happen on the Nintendo Switch. It was straightforward to update Metroid Prime 1 and Metroid Prime 2 to motion controls, but converting Metroid Prime 3 to normal controls would be a Herculean effort, as it is scripted very specifically using volumetric triggers to detect the motion in precise manners to do specific switches, and the bosses are tuned to take into account the ease of gestural aiming. Now, here's what gets me, right? I understand all of that, and it would probably add some issues developing wise, right? But we also can just use the motion controls if we want, but it seems like what they're doing with The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, you can play motion controls, or you can just play with traditional controls. And I'm not a developer here. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know, but I'm hoping they can do the same with Metroid Prime Trilogy 3. Maybe what's actually holding it up is that Metroid Prime Prime 1 and 2 is actually done, but the third one, they're still having some issues with it. Because I remember years ago, before we even saw Metroid Prime 4, just the logo, of course, in the music, Reggie Fils-Aimé said, you can ask me about Metroid if you want. And he had the Samus pin on his coat. Reggie Fils-Aimé, who's the legendary guy over at Nintendo of America. He ain't there no more, but I'm wondering if they've always been working on it, and they're saying that it's not going to happen on the Nintendo Switch. But they didn't rule out the Nintendo Switch Pro. See, this game might be a little bit too graphically demanding for a base Nintendo Switch, and maybe this is what they've been doing, introducing all of these games in the cloud-based service. Maybe when you introduce the Nintendo Switch Pro, the games that are too powerful to run on the baseline Nintendo Switch, well, you can just go ahead and play that on the cloud. And if you don't like it, go ahead and buy that Nintendo Switch Pro, right? And I do want to also count that none of the Metroid games have sold over 3 million copies, which is why I would also understand why Nintendo is apprehensive. But then they out here putting out new IPs like ARMS and Splatoon, with Splatoon 3 getting ready to happen, but that's still one of the newer ones. It's not a super legacy title. It's not Legend of Zelda or Mario or anything like that. But Splatoon is definitely a big contender. But ARMS and Splatoon, the newer IPs, are doing very well. People want games for Nintendo. Nintendo is full on back. You give us a Nintendo Switch that has more power and you put it on the TV and suddenly it's 4K. Well, if you give us Metroid Prime, okay? If you give us Metroid Prime with a 4K system, yeah, people are gonna eat that up. And I want to give some credit to my boy Jeff Grubb over there. He the guy with the Summer Games mess, right? He said Luigi's Mansion 3 sold 10 million copies. Clubhouse Games sold 3 million copies. Metroid Prime 4 is going to easily do 7 million copies. And I agree, it might even do more than 7 million copies if you release this trilogy first. I just gotta really say it, as a guy who's not even the biggest Metroid fan, and I'm just excited because I have it and I played it, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool and I would love to see it redone. They got me campaigning kind of hard. I don't even have all of the knowledge of the lore, but if you give me Metroid Prime Trilogy at launch, or Breath of the Wild at launch with the Nintendo Switch Pro, well then that's easy right there. I'll definitely be digging into all three of those games, no question. Seriously, I actually love Metroid Prime. I love the Metroid games. I've even played the bad one on Nintendo 3DS, Metroid Prime Hunters or whatever, Federation Force. That game was only bad because Samus wasn't in it and it was very different. And it had no business being on the 3DS because you needed 2 analogs. It had that little nub. It really wasn't all that best. But the game, there was some fun there. If they remastered that and they remastered Metroid Other M and fix that stuff up a little bit, I think people would actually eat it up. So really give us a good introduction with Metroid Prime Trilogy and have people fall into that universe. As soon as they hit Prime, they're going to want to buy it. So I really think, especially on the Nintendo Switch, with the history that the Nintendo Switch has, you cannot deny the numbers. Just like Jay-Z says, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Over 80 million units sold. You give us Metroid Prime on the Switch, that alone would sell maybe 7 to 10 million copies. But then you give us Metroid Prime 4 maybe a year or two later and whoop, well, you got another hit on your hands. Alright, lads and laddies, this is it. That's the wrap for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if y'all are still hyped for that Final Fantasy VII Remake integrated with that long title. Let me know if you're just interested in the expansion. Did you finish the base game? Have you yet to play the base game? Let me know what you think about that down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about just this whole Apple and Epic situation. What do you think about Epic just ready to shill out some cash just to get more exclusives, well, console exclusive games to their platform? And let me know what you think about Metroid Prime Trilogy coming out, maybe not on a Nintendo Switch, but possibly on a Nintendo Switch Pro. I couldn't imagine it not being on the Pro, and if it's not on the Pro, it's just probably never coming. I just know that Nintendo isn't just going to give us Metroid Prime 4 when they know they can milk the Metroid Prime Trilogy somehow, because they've been milking everything else. They gave us a Mario 3D collection and just took it off the store after a year later. So I already know how Nintendo moves. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below. But lads and laddies, before you go, reminder, go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't already. If not, hit the dislike. It's all good. Go ahead and hit that red subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you know when your boy is posting. And just to let you know, I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Yesterday, today, bringing you some of the biggest gaming news you may have missed from yesterday, today. Lads and laddies, this video is for me.